What are your values? Tell me, right? That's what's being asked of us right now. You know, you doing a headstand and everyone loving it on Instagram. That means nothing in a pandemic. Like, how's your peace? Yeah, how's your spirit doing? Right?
Exactly.
That's so true. I was actually finding gratitude for that today. I was reflecting on the past, since the beginning of the year. I was really, really thankful. Just thinking into gratitude that I have the tools that I need to get through this, and that I get a chance to practice this, right? That every little thing is a call to action or non-action. So yeah, very grateful for that.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome. And Emily, I wanted to just give my nod to you because you named this series Through the Lens. And so, and you gave the nudge, and I got my creative juices flowing and ended up kind of reaching out to individuals like Swamiji that was here last week and Reggie who's here. So just a little, just bow to you, Emily. Thank you. Thank you. And you just, just a little kind of reminder of, you never know, I didn't ask her, but she shared, and that those little nudges, those little, when you want to just kind of just share from yourself, you would be surprised how it can motivate others. And this is an example of that. So thank you. So I'm going to just, out of the just respect of sound, I'm going to mute all, and then of course you can unmute, and I'll do all that good stuff when it's time to, Reggie, you'll have to unmute. Sorry. It's time to ask and create question. But I was introduced to Reggie. I've known his work a little bit throughout the years, but Joelle was a big, she'd been taking some courses with you and listening to you, and was really moved and felt that your voice needed to be heard here in our community and just across 495, and we're all connected. And I welcome you. I ended up taking one of his Sunday classes, and I'm hoping to take more and let that be like a place for myself. And it's really beautiful soul food and a beautiful place, a space. Reggie comes from a diverse background of experience and existence, and I'm looking forward to hearing your words and your voice and inspiring us. I'll just, because this has just been the most recent thing with the transition of Ruth and her just epic legacy. It was, like I've seen, you just know her, but it was interesting, the moment of hearing of her passing, just like how it pierced me. It just pierced, and just that respect. So I just want to kind of acknowledge that. And it's a good segue to you, because that's the world that you're swimming in right now. And it's not calm, and I would venture to say maybe not respectful to her seed, but I wanted to at least acknowledge that. So welcome, Reggie, and welcome to the Sangha. And I turn it over to you.
Indeed. Well, received and appreciated. Love and grace to all. Happy Sunday evening to you. Is everyone on the same time zone? Is everyone in Northern Virginia? More or less? Right on. Yeah, because I have to ask, because like my teaching practice is virtual for the most part, and I've got people tuning in from Dublin, Ireland, to Maui, Hawaii, right? So like I kind of need to know where people are coming from, just so I don't say good evening when it's more, whatever. And it's just also basic courtesy. Happy day, happy Sunday evening to y'all. Delightful to be with you, Mariam. Thank you for the open invitation to share and just to hold space in community, right? I think one of the things that I'm most humbled by in this season of transition, which has been a constant since March, but like in the season of transition, the one thing that keeps coming back for me, well, there are two things actually. One is the need for like unapologetic authenticity. So now is a time to like pull back the veil of all things, whether it be ignorance or fear or like insufficiency. You know, we live in a universe of abundance, but we're the ones who say that I lack all the time, and that's more mental orientation than anything. So it's an invitation to do that. And the other thing I would say that has been made abundantly clear is that at the same time, while we need radical authenticity, we need each other more than ever before, right? So it's a mutuality of radical authenticity buttressed by the nurturing of collective that I think is the most salient lesson of this season. So that's the orientation that I come from. So a little bit about me. God, where to begin? But long story short, I work for MoveOn.org, and I don't mention that to be expressly political, but I mention that because, like Mariam said, like that's the water that I'm swimming in, right? Like I've been in the heart of the resistance since 2015 as one of Bernie Sanders' top lieutenants. And most notably, I produced his concession at the Democratic National Convention, which prior to the Trump era was the most ridiculous experience that I have had. Why? Because I, one man, was asked to do an impossible mission in 2 days, basically. So how do you couple a movement to an apparatus when neither of them really like each other? And if you, like your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to do this. And I'm like, okay, so how did I do it? Yoga practice, real talk. I basically was like, okay, so this is the thing that's passing before me. I have to have the capabilities to do it, otherwise it wouldn't be passing before me. You know, from a psycho-spiritual orientation, I believe that I'm here right now to do what I'm supposed to do, right? Like I'm not here to be scared. That's not why I'm here. That may be why other people are here. But I'm here to be fierce. I'm here to be fearless. I'm here to be inspired. And in so doing, hopefully giving you the invitation to live the same way. Because that is the freedom that exists when we nourish ourselves with these practices in community. But that's something that hasn't been talked about often in the worlds where yoga, quote unquote, typically lives. I would consider myself a yoga teacher in addition to a activist, not an asana teacher. I'm a yoga teacher. What's the difference? The difference is that in my classes, in order to get into them, you have to fill out a survey. Why? Svadhyaya. I want you to study yourself, right? I want you to have an internal reckoning of the questions that I offer. Just to check things out. Don't take things at face value. I want to buttress critical thinking. Then there's the asana piece, right? You know, we work the body, but we also do a lot of breath work in my classes, because what is the one thing, this is open for everyone, what's the one thing that separates us from being dead? It's the breath, right? So if that's the one thing that keeps us from being dead, why do we take it for granted? Why do we just pretend like the next one's promised? It isn't. So we celebrate breath work in my teaching practice, you know, so I'm letting y'all into my recipe. Like, I don't really talk like this in class, but the recipe behind that is like, if it's the one thing that keeps us alive and we take it for granted, that's not happening in the 75 minutes that you spend with me, right? So even though you don't know what I'm doing, I'm reminding you of the preciousness of this thing that you take for granted. So when you are like, when you come upon a situation that challenges what you think is normal, your reflex is to, so you don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it anyway, right? So for those of you who ever come to one of my classes, now I'll let you in on the secret. So just enjoy the secret and don't tell anybody, right? So honor my confidence. So yoga teacher and activist who has been ridiculously given the mission of living that in these times on Capitol Hill, right? So what does that even mean? I've taught 5 members of Congress yoga and meditation. I've taught members of their staff yoga and meditation. This past Thursday, I taught 20 members of the DNC staff yoga and meditation. I've taught a Prince-themed yoga class to the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Let Black hippie in with purple malas and a cape to teach Prince asana. Why? Just to have fun, right? And so if you had told me 2 years ago when I started my certification journey that, hey man, you're gonna teach members of Congress and the DCCC Prince-themed yoga, I probably would have laughed. But it just goes to show you that Source knows more than we do. So, you know, that's what Ishvara Pranidhana is, just to surrender and go along for the ride, because the ride is more delightful than anything you can plan. So shout out to my planners. We need you, but not in the spiritual sense. Goddess doesn't need your plan. Goddess needs your fidelity, right? Goddess needs your open heart. They don't need your plans, right? Right? Because like, if you believe this practice as I do, we are representatives of that, right? I'm not planning anything, right? I'm here to receive. You know, it's funny when people say I'm channeling. I want to deconstruct that a bit. So what is a channel, right? It's something that you have to tune in to get a better frequency, right? So like when people say they're channeling spirit, think about what that requires. That requires you to tune in and be refined to be the right pitch to be able to conduct that. That's what these practices give us, right? These practices give us the mechanisms, the tools, but also the opportunity to make that virtuous circle of practice, creating space, taking up space, practice, create space, take up space. So for the course of your life, if you have a disciplined practice, that just means not only will you be able to take up more space, but you'll be able to hold that space. It's not for you to take, it's for you to hold. And so as you hold that space, that gives people a deeper opportunity to live that freedom, which the discipline practice avails to you. So that's kind of off the top of my head. So like activist, yoga teacher, not asana teacher. But I also want to offer one other thing before I want to open up to a few questions, and then we'll talk. So I'm more of a call and response kind of guy. I have some things that I want to say, but if I'm not serving your needs, why am I here? Like, that's another thing. I used to teach high school civics. And so I learned in teaching high school civics, like, if you ain't paying attention, people will be like this. And if they're not like this on their phone, they'll be checked out. So I'm not here for that. I'm here to give you what you need through my lived experience and hopefully inspire and nourish you in a way for you to be able to live the life of your dreams, right? So that's why I'm here. But one other thing I want to share is that, look, you don't need my help in realizing the times are crazy right now, right? Everything has shifted. Everything has shifted. And in the context of the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I want to offer one thing, which I'm sure we will talk about more. But and I said this in the beginning, but I want to repeat that for the benefit of everyone that may or may not have heard it. So when an elder transitions, it is an invitation for us to step forward. So I think that about Justice Ginsburg, you know, and the crazy thing about my teaching practice is that, like, I teach a deep relaxation class every Friday night. And some of the most iconic passings of this summer happened on Friday night. So John Lewis passed away on a Friday night, you know what I mean? Like, and that week I was talking about mourning. This week in my teaching practice, I was talking about reimagination. So reimagining the situation we finding ourselves in, only to have like feminist icon who like reimagined everything with respect to gender equality pass away. So for me, what that beckons, what that augurs is an understanding that when an elder passes away, it's our chance to reimagine and step into the wake that they've created, right? So we need to feel the feels, but I made a video about this for work, which will probably become an op-ed, is that one of the most beautiful things about the passing of Elder Ginsburg was her dissent. She viewed dissent as a hallmark of her activism, right? So the majority doesn't always have things right. And so if you are firm in your convictions, you need to have the confidence to dissent, and to dissent proudly. You may be the only one, but maybe that's your job. And so that's the last thing I'll offer as means of introduction, is that we are all called to do something special. Often people may be behind you, but sometimes you may be the only one. And the beauty of these practices is that it gives you such a grounding in peace and spirit that if you're the only one in terms of your physicality, you're not the only one because you have infinite abundance behind you. And in my tradition, I believe that I'm the wildest dreams made manifest of my ancestors. So all the success that I embody is because they prayed for it. And I may not be able to see them, but it doesn't matter because they're there. One last thing I'll say as corollary to that. My ancestors could not vote. My family is from Virginia. So like Lexington, Natural Bridge, Roanoke, Virginia. And my great-great-great-grandfather, his family was sold. So his first family was sold as chattel away. For his descendant to be walking around Capitol Hill with prayer beads talking about, Madam Speaker, what's good with you? Shows you how spirit works, shows you that when we avail ourselves to the will of the eternal, that they don't need our help, they just need our surrender, right? So I rejected all of this teaching stuff forever, like honestly, and we can talk a little bit about more about that also. But when I surrendered and was just like, okay, all right, I'm sorry, you know, I'm human, I get it. So when I did that, my teaching practice exploded. Like I was able to hold space for the impeachment process. I was considered like the spiritual center for impeachment. I was able to like be a mentor to members of Congress. Like Rashida Tlaib calls me sensei. It's crazy, right? You know, like, I don't know. But I didn't seek any of that, but it was in the cards for me. And the way that those cards unfolded is because I just surrendered to source and be like, all right, you tell me, I'm gonna just walk this out. So if I can offer anything, if you remember nothing else I tell you, remember the following. Breath is the key to your release. The deeper the breath, the more life that you have. And in that release, accentuate your exhales and let that exhale be a metaphor for what you need to do for the rest of your life, right? You know, short breath, tight breath usually leads to tight physicality, but the more expansive the breath, not only the more surrender is availed, but the more magic happens. Trust, like I'm living proof of that magic. So I will stop my opening filibuster and what I'm teasing about that political joke, huh? Want to offer questions, Miriam, like if you have any questions based on the conversation you and I had on Friday, let's open with that and then let's open it to everybody else.
Well, when we were talking, we kind of touched on a couple different topics and wanted to see if after the conversation, if there was some specific takeaways to speak about with the excavation that's happening around racism.
Yeah.
And the incredible separation that's happening in politics. Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, I think that's, I know what we were talking around that, and I feel your voice would be
right. Okay.
Welcome.
Cool. Well, I'll touch on those two things and then we'll open it up to y'all because again, like I said, I'm from a Baptist background. It's call and response. We gotta have community here. Yeah. And I'm also an organizer, right? So like for me, it's like, what do we think? Race. So, you know, one of the craziest things that has happened for many of us who are Black or brown is that it's as if millions of people finally woke up and saw that like Black people are being killed for no reason, right? Right. So that for many people is frustrating, right? Just like, yo, this has been happening for 400 years. How in the world are you just waking up to this, right? However, the blessing of of all of my practices is that it has given me actually grace because, you know, and this is what Miriam and I talked about, like that you just got here is not my concern. That you are here is my concern. So for anyone who is just waking up to this, welcome. For those who've been here for a while, welcome. What do we do now that we're all here at this moment? And I think that's the question that we all need to figure out, right? So for me as Black dude, I turned 46 in 2 weeks. Yeah, I've been messed with by the cops, you know, and like I'm relatively light skinned and I lived a privileged life. Man, I went to Yale undergraduate. You know, I have a master's degree from a European institution, right? You know, like I wear custom mala beads, right? So like I have a privileged life, and even with that, I'm still catching hell by the police. So for me, yoga and meditation have given me the space to acknowledge all of these things that they happened, but not be angry about it anymore, right? So these are just things that have happened to me that I, through these practices, have been able to process. And the healing that I've experienced individually and personally and this is what I talked about in the beginning, that individual healing, these practices, that internal alignment creates space. And they created space internally, which allows me to hold ridiculous space externally, right? So my healing from the visceral anger that I had towards everyone in law enforcement has allowed me to, as recently as 2 weeks ago, have a cop ask me, well, what do you think we should do to better process these situations? And so I called my best friend afterwards. I was like, can you believe a cop asked me what to do, right? But that shows you that he didn't see me as Black dude. He saw me as teacher. He saw me as healer. And that's the beauty of these practices, right? Because in the beginning, I have my hat to the side, like I'm unapologetically hip hop, like grew up in like the Tupac, Notorious B.I.G. generation. I listened to Public Enemy in the 10th grade, you know what I mean? So I've been fighting the power for quite some time. So that's the orientation that I bring to the world in terms of my philosophical orientation. But yoga and meditation have allowed me to have that hard edge in my mind filtered through a soft heart, and recognizing our commonality. So I may be having these experiences, but what I said to the guy because the interesting thing that happened in that class was about 2 minutes into the class, he raised his hand and I'm like, what's up? He was like, I don't even want to be here. And I'm like, wow, right? So I felt honored that he was comfortable to say that, right? He's like, I don't even want to be here. And, I'm not very comfortable talking about race. I could have responded by being like, are you serious, white man? I mean, I really could have responded that way. But how I responded was just like, brother, look here. What we all need to remember is that none of us like talking about it, but it's for completely different reasons, right? And so let's explore those reasons together. And exploring our different reasons for not wanting to talk about it, let's find some commonality. And in that commonality, from that shared humanity that we have, maybe we can find better ways to serve one another. And so I said that 2 minutes in, from that was authentic. And what that did for the remaining 88 minutes of that call is that and this is with a group of mostly white men. There was one Latino brother, but that's it. Crying and heartfelt sharing about how can I be a better ally? Because I approached that from a heart space, because instead of me being like, are you serious? You're uncomfortable about race? I mean, according to some people, I'm well within my right to be that snarky. But as a teacher, as a practitioner, it's not I don't see anywhere in the Yoga Sutras where it says be snarky and give someone shade because they're uncomfortable. Maybe that's in the 5th sutra, I don't know. Or maybe it's in some deep cut text I don't know about. But everything I see talks about having open-hearted compassion and recognizing the complexity of the human experience, right? And then from that recognition of the complexity, offering an opportunity for us to share that complexity together, right? So I've been able to, through these practices, hold that complex space with all groups, but most notoriously and most importantly, white groups recently. And what has that done? If someone finally sees something, that's terrifying, right? If you are asleep and you're jolted out of being asleep, no one likes to be awoken like that, right? So another thing that I have, part teacher, part activist, is that it's my goal to keep you engaged in the heart space, because this work may never be finished in my lifetime. And we have to cultivate a marathon mentality and prepare ourselves as such, right? So what does that mean? That means you take it a bit at a time. That means you take it at your pace. That means that you train accordingly. No one who goes and runs a marathon with no training, right? Who tries to scale a major peak without training, right? So in order for us to attack or embrace the racial question in our country, we have to treat it not only as a marathon, but what I say for yoga audiences as well, is we need to treat race and racial conversations as approaching the most complex asana in the practice, right? So who among us would try and like on day one in the practice, pop up into handstand with Padmasana legs, right? Probably a teenager, but no one else would do that. So similarly, we need to train. So you can't do handstand if your wrists aren't ready for that, right? So you train the wrists, right? Then you've got to get the shoulder girdle ready. And then you've got to like be okay with being spatiotemporally dislocated, right? So being upside down is hard, right? So you have to factor in all these things. Then when you piece all of them together, then you try the handstand. But it's active work, and you approach where you are with reverence, with care, and with compassion. So in the same way that I would approach an advanced asana, that's how I approach race. And that's how I would encourage everyone else to approach race, right? Take deep breaths, read, just like study. But the other part of it too, and this is what I say to folks who are newer to this, it's not just enough to read a book. It's not just enough to read a book. We have to apply our knowledge. Like me reading about headstand does not get me into the pose. I gotta try and kick up. I gotta fall out, right? I remember the first headstand I did without the wall was the most terrifying thing in my whole life, right? Because look, I'm 6'2", I'm 265. Like this neck holding all of this, that's a lot, man. Especially psychologically. But what did I do? I was like, okay, I'm freaking out. Cool. Breathe deeper. Find your center. Find your core. Adjust. And then escape safely, right? So similarly, I would encourage us to like have that same orientation with respect to racial stuff. Like take a deep breath, right? Ease into it. But the other thing too is once you, like when you see something, you can't unsee it. So even if you have unconsciously notions of like, man, I wish this would never happen, disabuse yourself of those notions because this is where we are, right? So the other thing from a yoga perspective is that like I study Tantra very, like that's my philosophical orientation. So one of the basic tenets of Tantra for me is radical acceptance of what's happening right now. And from that radical acceptance, then that predicates your next move. So it doesn't matter what happened before. I mean, you can take lessons of what happened before, but that doesn't necessarily determine what's going to happen next. The biggest bits of information you get are from what you see right now. So similarly, in this situation right now, how can we radically affirm what we see? And in so doing, from a compassionate place and a clear mind, take the next necessary steps towards our collective liberation. So that's what I would offer with respect to race in terms of beginning that way. And the other thing I would say is that, we, on the other side of this election, I'm probably going to do less activist work. And here's what I mean by that. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm a human. So I'm more interested in how do we heal as people? How do we begin to have the conversations with people that we do not agree with? So this me versus you thing, I'm over that. I'm over that. And that's also not consistent with all the practices that I have, right? So if my practices are about union of mind, body, and spirit, I can't be part of something that continues to focus division. So that's my personal thing. So what does that mean? That means that I want to begin holding space for people who don't think like me, who don't look like me, and in so doing, force all of us to have conversations that are long overdue. Because it's in exploring that no man's land that we find what we actually have in common. right? One of my best friends is a conservative Republican who voted for Donald Trump in 2016. I was the best man in his wedding. His daughters call me uncle. He's clearly like a white dude from so clearly, but because of me not demonizing him, he called me a couple of weeks ago and I was like, man, I just can't do this anymore. Because he is about as diehard Republican as it gets. He's like, man, I just can't do this anymore. I was like, homie, what are you talking about? I can't do this anymore. Like, dude, I've known you for 20 years. Like, that could mean so many things. Like, what do you mean? And what he was saying is that I can't just be a blind Republican anymore. And how did that happen? That happened because his super progressive friend never pointed a finger at him and called him stupid. I was just like, dude, I disagree with you. I don't understand how you can have daughters and do that, but you're still my homeboy. I love you. I do not understand anything that you just said, but I love you anyway. And you're still one of my best friends. Right on, right? So that orientation is what I want to seek to like not only nurture, but embody, right? It ain't about Democrat or Republican or anything right now. It's about the Republic. It's not about black or white. I mean, yes, it's about black in terms of like racial justice, but the reason that it's so egregious is that black folks are not considered human. If we were considered human, we wouldn't have any of these issues. Not, in the beginning of the country, we were considered 3/5 of a person, and that was just men, right? No one even talked about black women. So we have to begin to view each other as whole. So for me, that began with my healing. But we also, in terms of societal understanding, that begins also through having these tough conversations, right? And being able to hold space for dueling opinions, and in that place, find the commonality.
Well, let's take a breath. Very inspired, and a lot of fire in there, but love, like passion, fire, that feeds the activist.
Yeah.
But I'd love to open it up just for sharing and any questions. Curious to even, we're kind of in the middle of something, I'm not going to name it, but just something. And so even in the middle of this, you're probably going through shifts of expansion of awareness.
Yeah.
And so to even share what's happening in the midst of this is fair. We don't have to have answers. Just sometimes asking the question or just sharing is powerful.
Yeah, and I want to buttress that by just saying that, writ large, we're in a liminal space. And so what does liminal even mean? It means that we're almost at the point of no return, right? So what we were, based on the pandemic, based on the racial justice stuff, based on all these other things, what we were, there's no going back to that. That's gone. We have no idea where we're headed, right? Like, we don't know where we're going to end up. So there's a lot of not knowing, and we got to be okay with that. And the best way that we're okay with that is to tell one another, be like, hey, I have no idea, but I love you anyway, right? So like that basic opening and that basic sharing of vulnerability, to me, is key to that.
It's so key. So there's a question. I don't know if you see it in the chat, Reggie. If you want to address. Yeah.
Jan or Jan?
Jan.
Ron. So,
and Jan, I like to read it in my German accent. So how can I convey stuff others don't want to hear about? How can I reduce or even do away with the ignoring and ignorance? So this I did write down in the beginning, and then I heard your talk, and I would guess that your answer is love.
Mm-hmm.
And then how?
Right. So thank you for the question. Love and patience is what I would say. And here's the example that I use for that. So I was asked to go to a yoga class probably 10 years before I did. And when someone asked me to go, I responded by being like, are you serious? Like, why would I want to do something stupid like that? I was probably that caustic, right? Like, I was not nice. I was not elegant about it whatsoever. And the person who invited me just kept being kind. She just kept being nice. And so now that I know from my reckoning, like, she planted the seed and she was just watering it with kindness, love, and patience. So 10 years later, when I'm just when I started practicing asana, I dove into the whole thing, right? So I was like, okay. I called her and was like, yo, all right. So you were right. Like, you were right. And I want to thank you for inviting me, because even though I was a jerk in my response, I now know that you saw this as something that would be helpful to me. And you consistently kept sharing from the heart. And she would share articles, like all the things, right? Like, send articles. I think you would, and I would delete the art. I mean, whatever, like, just total, like, denial. But compassion, truth, love, and patience are like water that wears away the rough edges of a stone, right? So you offering loving, compassionate, kind space to someone who's ignorant will be more effective than either ignoring them or forcing something on them. Because people are ready when they're ready, right? So love, yes, but love, compassion, patience, and consistency, right? So maybe not all the time, but I mean, another example is this. So from a political perspective, like I said, the example I just shared with my buddy, like, right, exactly, right. I would say that. If I had every right to be like, yo, like, you're a hypocrite, you have daughters, how can you support this guy? Like, you're crazy. Like, I totally could have been that way. But instead, I was just like, dog, look, I don't agree with you. And, thank you for sharing your opinion with me. I don't agree with it whatsoever. But like I said, I love you anyway. And I just kept doing my thing. And this is actually a pretty funny story. So this same guy, he took a yoga class with me and his daughters and his wife in April. So the guy who's conservative Republican and never this, never that, was like, hey man, we're coming to your class. I'm like, who's we? And so he's like, me and the girls. And I was like, you're coming to my yoga class online? So my example not only like softened him politically, but he tried it out. I mean, he hasn't been back since, but whatever. Like, he's tried it. But the reason that he tried it is because I just consistently lived my experience as my experience and not trying to force it on nobody, right? People who've known me for years are like, you're so much calmer. I'm like, praise all of them that I'm much calmer, because like that level of anger is not sustainable. So love and patience and kindness have allowed that anger to be the passion that Miriam was talking about. But I think you can all hear it energetically. Like, I've got nothing but love. Like, I got a lot of fire, but it's nothing but love. It just means my chakras are good, right? So the passion is here, but it's coming through the heart and not the mouth. So it's all.
I hear you. However, now it's, I think, 7 weeks until the election of your country. I will not vote. I don't. I can't, of course. So the patience part is constrained by 7 weeks. How to cope with that?
Well, it depends on what the aim is, right? Like, there are some people who I'm never going to get to agree with me in 7 weeks. It's not my job to talk to them. Like, my job right now is to inspire people who believe like me, right? And then on the other side of this, and consistently do so from a place of love and compassion, right? Because I'm of the belief that there are more people who want the world that we want. We just have to talk to them, or we just have to convince them that it's possible, right? So I'm not going to convince someone who doesn't agree with me philosophically anything in the next 7 weeks. But what I can do on the other side of this is hold space for whatever the outcome, right? Because in the arc of human history, especially from the African American experience, we have been through worse, right? Like, no one is like hanging me from a tree right now. right? Like no one is like forcing me to do labor against my will, right? So, you know, if anything, I'm not talking to the people in the next 7 weeks that don't agree with me. Like I talk to them by my example. I talk to them by embodying kindness everywhere that I go. So I'm consistent with that. So when it's time for us to engage, it's based on this consistency that I've offered. Because no one, I can't change anybody's mind. You know, that's their job. My job is to just like plant seeds, and I may not be there to reap the harvest, but it's my job to plant the seeds.
Thank you. Thank
Indeed,
you.
blessing. Who's next? Gita. Yeah, Prince is my spirit animal, and the first class I ever taught was on Prince's birthday in 2018. So like my teaching practice was born on Prince's birthday. So like it's a thing. What's the line between that and being an apologist though? Tell me a little bit more about that. Tell me a little bit more about what you mean.
I guess I'm thinking about like, not like calling people out, but holding people accountable for shitty opinions of other humans. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I believe in the First Amendment, right? I believe in freedom of speech, right? And sometimes freedom of speech means that I don't agree with what you say, right? And I think, so for me, it's not my job to hold someone accountable. It's my job to be the best me possible. And what I found is that my authentic rendering of my true self, rooted in love and compassion, is far more compelling than me trying to be shitty to somebody. You know what I mean? Me being like, you know what? I think this totally sucks. Like, instead of that, me being like, here's what I think. You think this is dope? I think this is amazing. So through me being my authentic self, I'm creating the world that I want to live in, right? So rather than tear down their stuff I don't agree with, like I was like, I see you. Here's what I think. And it's kind of like an old school MC battle. I was like, here's my rhyme. That's your rhyme. That's cute. But what about this? What do you feel about this? Right? Oh, yeah. Right. And then by the end of the time, my party's live and their party doesn't even matter. Right. So, and it's also, you know, we have to figure out ways to use that fire of wanting to call someone accountable. And remember the following: none of us are perfect. Right. So we have to embrace our imperfection. And that even means for people that we don't agree with and don't like. Right. Because there have been plenty of times where like I haven't been like again, like with respect to my yoga practice, like I can't wait to see the movie of my life when I'm on the other side of this physical form and like see what I said to my friend when I was being awful. Right. You should come to yoga, whatever. Like, you know, like that was not cool. Right. So I, who am like king of the hill yoga teacher now, Hill is in Capitol Hill, began by completely being everything that I'm not right now, right? We have to give grace for people to evolve, for people to transform. And for me, I call people out compassionately, be like, yo, I don't agree with what you said. Here's what I think. And I leave it at that. It's not my job to tear you down, right? It's my job to like get in touch with my authenticity and then speak that at the top of my voice. And then whatever is supposed to manifest from that will manifest, right? So I'm not an adherent to call out culture. That's not really my jam. I prefer to call people in and then have the tough conversations. You know, I want people to be so open and vulnerable that they feel free to say things that they're not comfortable with so that we can have a tough conversation about that, as opposed to shouting something. Not saying this is what you're saying, but this is the manifestation I've seen very recently with one of my friends' businesses, where people were shouting so much that no one heard anybody. And like from the untrained ear, everyone was like, I'm hurt, I'm hurting, no, I'm hurting, no, I'm hurting. And no one was just like, so how do we heal each other? Right? So for me, the overarching goal is how do I find space to heal one another through my example and through my words and through my offering. So that's what I would offer to that. And so it's not, for me, it's not so much about being an apologist, because, you know, especially given my work, like we speak truth to power. Like I'm friends with Nancy Pelosi now, but I was in her doghouse for quite a while, right? Being like, ma'am, you need to impeach this guy. Well, blah, 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 whatever, you know what I mean? So like, I just spoke that with compassion. So, and my colleagues, this is actually quite interesting. Actually, I'm glad this came to mind, because this is probably a good example of what I want to offer here, is that my colleagues wanted to take out a full-page ad in the New York Times and Washington Post calling Nancy Pelosi a coward for not impeaching Donald Trump in like April of 2019. And as the Hill relationship guy, I was like, if you do that, my job is over, because we will never be able to say anything to her. Well, she's wrong, and she's a coward. And I'm like, well, consider this. I was like, for her, in her world, she needs 218 votes in order to impeach this guy. Right now we have 6. So if you can get me to 140 votes, maybe we can turn the pressure up on her that way. So that's the conversation I had with my people. Then I went to her people and was just like, you know, you're crazy, right? You know that you need to impeach this guy. And they were just like, well, we don't have the votes. And I'm like, what number do you need to see? 140, 150? What do you need to see, right? So I was able to thread the needle on both of those. That's actually also part of my job. So what did that do? By us not being like over the top, when the energy shifted, I was able to be like, Madam Speaker, you're now at 160. How can we support you? Whereas if I was just like, you coward, you know, you suck, blah, 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 which is what my colleagues wanted to do, we would not have been able to have the leading role in the impeachment process, because I spoke the truth with kindness, stood by my position, and then when the wind shifted, because I spoke the truth with kindness and stood by my position, they viewed me with respect as opposed to scorn. And so in that role, I was able to step in. I personally, and us organizationally, were able to step in and offer leadership, even though in the beginning we had a genuine disagreement of opinion. Right, Eleanor, exactly, right, exactly. So I rose above the divisiveness with conviction and compassion, but more compassion, because convicted, everyone was convicted, but I just held space for that complexity. And trust me, that was probably the most ridiculous yoga lesson I had. I was like, I don't agree with anything they're saying on both sides, but here I am in the middle. So I was probably quite literally like Hanuman. I was like, so I want to get there. I'm here, right? So that's what I would offer to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Totally does. It's hard. It's hard to find that space, you know?
Oh yeah. That's why daily practice is important. That's why daily meditation is important. Like that's why doing this stuff. And this is what I say to some of my students. I'm like, I would rather you have a 10-minute practice every day than 1 hour once a week. Because it's in the disciplined practice of these things that gives you that pause, right? So when anger comes, I can be like, all right, as opposed to you know? So shout out to daily practice. We need that. Indeed. Any other questions? Actually, come up with some questions. I've been drinking a lot of water today and I must use the restroom. TMI, I'll be back in 60 seconds.
Lots of energy. It's good. Good. I'll share that, after 7 years of teaching the trauma-informed, I've had to we just decided to make some changes to it because of just the way the world is, and leaning into that compassion and figuring out how to now, have for us having a segment on speaking so much about the individual trauma, the trauma-informed training is so much about the individual, but not talking about the collective trauma and the cultural collective trauma, which racism is a part of that, but it's not all of it. And that and that's like that part of being compassionate and willing to kind of not feel like, okay, I know exactly how to do this with the yoga practice, but to expand that, my own teachings while come back in my own awareness. I was just sharing how, after 7 years of teaching, and I shared this with you, teaching the trauma informed, like making this shift of dealing with a collective cultural trauma in order to bring up a healthy way of bringing up the racial trauma without creating division. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that for myself was a big learning of like, how do we have those challenging conversations? So like Bita, like, okay, now maybe you've decided you're not going to call people out, but then now the layer is like, okay, then how am I going to have the conversation if it's not going to be calling them out? And I'm a little bit like you, Bita, but sometimes it's like, sometimes walking away is okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes there just may be another way if we consider.
Yeah, and the one thing I would offer in conclusion to that is that, my job right now is to talk to people in power. And the way that I found is that cultivating relationship yields deeper transformation than viewing someone as my enemy, right? Like, or expressing my displeasure for them as my enemy, right? So I have relationships with people I don't necessarily like, but I just want to keep open communication so we can have the tougher conversations, right? Like, so for instance, like there's a group, what's the name of this group? I can't remember them now, but they're arch conservative. And we came together over the impeachment process. And I was like, look, the one thing we agree on right now is saving the republic. So can we hold space and talk about that? Like, I don't want to hear about anything else that you guys talk about because that might make me upset. I was like, but this is the one thing that we agree with. And this is the one thing that's of importance to my work right now. And we found a way to work together, right? I would not have been able to do that. And you could probably hear this from like my history that I shared with you. For Bita, for me to be able to tell you what I just told you shows you that yoga and meditation work. Like, I was the king of like giving you the 14-letter password and like 2 fingers, not these, and being out. Like, I was the king of that, right? And for me to be able to be like, well, consider this, like, shows how these practices have impacted me. Because my trend, I used to trend hot, like just like that. Like in a minute, like I had one tell I would squint. And if I would squint, you're like, oh my God, this guy's gonna go to outer space real soon, right? So for me to be able to go from this to just like, shows you how the practice, especially the pranayama and meditation practice, have helped me, right? And to be able to speak from a grounded place as opposed to flying off the handle, because I was amazing at that, amazing. So what else, dear friends? What else?
How are you all being inspired or considering any refinements, any willingness?
This is the,
Go ahead.
This is the second time today I'm hearing that message of the universe saying, use me. I read it in something earlier today, and I just love what you're talking about tonight. It really does resonate. Thank you. And I'm going to just be digesting this for a while, I think, because I am one of those people who's trying to figure out how to participate in this discussion of anti-racism and in a more meaningful way, learning as I go, and so this is helpful. This is helpful. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And one thing I would offer to that, Eleanor, is that don't be afraid to ask questions, right? Like the worst question to ask is the one that you don't ask, right? So because you can't, like, digestion and creativity are messy, right? Like we have forgotten that. We have forgotten that the digestive process, it's because it's contained in our guts, right? It's actually quite messy. So like remember that, and remember that even though it can be an inelegant process, it has an elegant result, right?
Yeah.
Because you take what you need, you release what you don't, and then you move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
And just you verbalizing that, Eleanor, I think you're affirming, right? That idea of like, let me be a vessel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
you're
it really,
affirming.
it's powerful. It's like, use me. What
Yeah.
next?
Yeah.
You drive the bus.
Yeah.
You drive. Okay, I'll give you the key.
I think Jamie Lee, is that it?
Yes. Thank you very much, Reggie. I had the pleasure of listening to your webinar when you were there with Hanuman Academy, Social Change from the Inside Out. I have to say, I mean, it must be really exhausting. We don't have enough yoga teachers like you. It must be really exhausting to do the work, the inner work, and to be compassionate and patient where, you know, you do not, where being compassionate and patient has not gotten us anywhere in a way that we are in the 21st century and we have, you know, from white supremacists to all of these things that have been allowed to take over. And, you know, I just don't know how to express it, but you had said once, and somebody else had said it, like none of us are free when one of us is oppressed.
Yeah.
And we have so many oppressed people. Now we are reaching the people, as you said yourself, you know, the more privileged people. We are not reaching the oppressed people in a way. How can we reach to the oppressed in order to be there for them?
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean?
Right. Yeah, so
we have friends on both sides and we can talk to each other. Yes, we can be patient and compassionate, allow everybody's opinions and be open about it and everything. But comes a time where we need to radically educate people and we need a radical change.
Yeah.
We are in the 21st century. We can't just be saying, you know, I'm doing all the work and I'm doing the yoga and the meditation and all of this, and things are not happening. If I was on that other side of the African American who's been shot 8 times all the time, just like that, you know, and the other guy getting away with it, I would not want to be hearing these kind words all the time. I want action. I want, like you said it, silence is violence. Right? So how do we educate people, drastically bring a drastic change? You sound like Van Jones sometimes, you know. I mean, I love Van Jones, but does he do yoga? I don't know, but
he meditates.
Always like, he has this aura about him, like, I want to say, don't you ever get angry? But of course, he must get angry. Don't you ever get angry?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. And I'll offer 2 things. One is that my success is my act of defiance, right? So in a system that seeks to destroy people who look like me, I am in a place where I'm able, so the kind words I'm speaking are to Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and those and as a Black dude. And so those kind words are like, you need to get your stuff together, blessings, right? So like, I've gotten this far because of that approach. And you know, change takes time, but when it's time for the change to happen, it happens like this. We just have to keep chipping away at it, right? We don't have the benefit of seeing the continuum of eternity, right? And here's what I mean by that. Like, my grandmother, I still have her, she's 93 years old. Like, she and I talk politics all the time. And I asked her, I was just like, so in your life, did you ever think that your nephews and grandsons and all these other folks would be doing what we're doing? She was like, I didn't think it, but I hoped it would happen. right? So when I'm like, every time I talk to the speaker, I'm like, Grandma, Nancy Pelosi just said this to your grandson, right? So I'm able to have that patience because I'm rooted in the continuum of my family story. So it didn't happen quick enough, perhaps, for my grandmother, but I'm living in the abundance of her sacrifice. And so that's why I sacrifice, and that's why I offer myself in this way, is because it's in fidelity to my ancestors, right? It's in fidelity to the continuum that I seek to serve. Also, like, bear in mind that sometimes kindness is looking someone in the face and being like, you're dead wrong, right? So my kind words aren't always in the way that kindness is portrayed. Like, sometimes the most kind thing you can say to someone is, I disagree with you, and here's how I disagree with you, and here's why I don't support that. Right? So that level of directness is what I'm hopeful for. Yeah, right, exactly, Susan. Like, kindness is not always nice. And so that's what I would say. Like, I'm very kind, but I'm not the nicest dude sometimes. You know, especially when it comes to social change and those sorts of things, because the truth is always received, but it's never received when it's not spoken, right? So it's incumbent upon us to speak it. How it lands, that's not up to us. But we have to speak it. If we don't speak it, if we don't use this, then this power never can manifest. So what I would offer are two things. One is that I hear you on the frustration, but the main reason I'm not frustrated is because, like, my lived experience is testament that change can happen, and it does happen. And it doesn't happen in ways that anyone can articulate necessarily, but it happens in the ways that it should, right? My lived experience is that, like, my parents didn't go to college, I went to Yale, right? And I don't say that to pat myself on the back, I just say that because my grandfather, it used to be illegal for my people to read, right? And so I have, my patience comes from the faith that I have, not only in my ancestors, but in my practices. And I'm also, the words that I say behind closed doors, again, they're kind, but sometimes they're very direct, because that's what the moment calls for. So when I hear, when people are like, you're too kind, I'm like, no, that's not possible, right? Because sometimes kindness shows up with me being like, you're dead wrong, and I'll never support that. You know, or a perfect example in that story I shared earlier with Nancy Pelosi's people, they were like, please don't mention that to the speaker. And I looked at them and said, please don't call on me. Don't be trying to bully me. I don't play that. And so they called on me in this meeting. They're like, Reggie, what's your update for Madam Speaker? I'm like, Madam Speaker, I'm working on Iran, investigations, and impeachment. So I was in the doghouse, but yeah, so I speak truth to power, but just not in the way that everyone wants me to, right? And I also know this, and I'll end by saying this, is that the upheaval that we're in, the energetic shifts that are taking place, energy doesn't die, it just transforms, right? So it's up to us to figure out how we're going to channel this energy, right? I've chosen to channel it into my teaching practice. So thank you for what you said about me being exhausted. It is tiring, but interactions like this actually fill my cup, because like what I'm doing, there aren't that many teachers that are doing. And it's because I want to shake the tree. Like, I want us to be a yoga community, not an asana playground, right? I want us to live these values. And in order for that to happen, it's got to happen from a kind, but not a nice place, right? So I hear you on the impatience piece, but I have faith, and I'll share one last thing. I spoke to students on Friday, it was Thursday morning. They were 17 and 18 years old in San Diego, California. So if y'all know any like high school seniors that need a civics teacher, holler at me. I love talking to kids. And they asked me, they were just like, so what do we do? Like, why should we care? And I was like, look, you don't need my help to tell you that everything kind of sucks right now, right? Like, Stevie Wonder can see that. Ray Charles can see that. He's blind and dead. Like, you know, we can see that things aren't okay right now. But your job, young one, is to radically reimagine where we are. So that it sucks, we understand that, but how will you make it better? I was like, reimagine that. And so spend your days reimagining it. And when you come up with good ideas, tell me, right? Because you're the generator of like our renaissance. The youth is the generator of that renaissance. And I don't think anyone's ever talked to them that way, because based on what the teacher said, they were like, everyone did their homework and they were just like, who is this guy? And blah, 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 blah. But I'm here to tell you that when you speak these words to the youth and they get lit up, then change will happen like that. I've kind of given up on people that are older than me, honestly. Like with respect to the political piece, I'm like, I'll talk to y'all, but like, give me the kids, right? Because I want them to know that there's no limit before society tells them the false narrative there is one. So every group of children that I've spoken to, I've said the exact same thing. I was like, your job is to reimagine everything that's happening right now. And once you have a good idea, scream it so loud that people are drawn to it. And so what is that doing? That's giving them permission to dream. It's giving them encouragement to dream out loud. And it's also giving them low-key organizing skills, which will be required to fix the mess that we're in. So I'm here to tell you that based on all the kids that I talk to, I'm not worried about the future. We just gotta make it through this present moment. And as we make it through this present moment, if we continue to infuse those messages that I just told you into the kids, we'll be in a better place before we know it. And I believe that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would love if you're up for it, the last 10 minutes, to maybe lead a little, take us into a little breath or meditation.
Definitely, I'd love to. Last call for shares though. Anyone else care to share anything? Going once, twice. So before we meditate though, I want people to stand up. We've been seated for a while. So let's shake up the energy, right? So let's get out of the sedentary mindset and give yourself 90 seconds of motion. Whatever that looks like. So I want this motion to be unscripted before I lead you into anything. So maybe some high knees, get into the hips because we've been seated for a while. Open the heart with some light back bends maybe. And I'm going to put on my headphones, so pardon with me as I transition. And I want this to be organic. So get into the shoulders, get into the hips, get into the side body. Let me get these headphones together. And begin to get into the breath. Now. Yeah, we're good. Perfect. All right, so the headphones are working. So let's 20 more seconds of movement. So maybe get into the hips, some high knees if you're able to do so. Cross the arms back and forth just to get into the body after being seated for a while. Maybe a few shoulder circles, take them in either direction. Then come to stillness in the next breath or so. Mountain pose. Feet hip distance apart, shoulders back and down. Maybe make fists and open and close the hands. Rooted in the feet. Let's get in touch with the breath before we have a meditative moment. So we just shook up the body after being sedentary. Let's calm back down. via the breath. So place one hand over the heart, one hand over the belly, shoulders back and down. We'll do 4 breaths from Tadasana, and then we'll take our seat. So inhale, fill the belly, fill the ribs, fill the top of the chest. Hold at the top for 1, 2. Exhale out the mouth, please. 3 more like that. Inhale, fills the belly, fills the ribs, fills the top of the chest. Hold it. Exhale out the mouth. Switch the hands, so different hand on the heart, different hand on the belly. 2 more breaths, please. Inhale, fill belly, fill ribs, fill the top of the chest. Hold. Exhale out the mouth. Last one with this arm orientation. Inhale, fill belly, fill ribs, fill top of the chest. Hold it. Exhale out the mouth. Release the hands. Inhale, arms overhead. Exhale, draw the center line down. 3 more like that. Inhale up. Exhale, draw center line down. Twice. Inhale up. Exhale, draw center line down. Last, inhale up. Exhale, draw center line down. 2 side bends and then we quit. Inhale, arms overhead or place them behind the head. Exhale, side bend to the left. 3 breaths in the side bend, please. Inhale. Exhale, 1. Inhale. Exhale, 2. Inhale. Exhale, 3. Using the strength in the legs and the core, come up to center on the inhale. Exhale, side bend to the right. Noticing how when we're grounded, we can use our core for movement and strength. 3 breaths, please. Inhale through the nose. Exhale out the mouth. Inhale. Exhale, 2. Inhale. Exhale, 3. Use the obliques to come to center. Release the hands from behind the head. Now make your way towards a comfortable seat, or feel free to take Shavasana if that calls to you, but find a position in the body that brings comfort to mind. Comfort in the physical form. If you've taken Sukhasana or easy seat, I encourage you to switch the crossing of your legs to the one that's not as comfortable. Begin now to embody discomfort and finding comfort with that discomfort. It's also good for balance in the pelvis. Allow gaze to soften or eyes to close altogether, whatever is more comfortable for you. And then begin to deepen the breath. Allow the breath to get increasingly deeper on the inhale and increasingly deeper on the exhale, more organically for the first couple of moments. And the invitation is to use the breath as a tool to awaken the body, because the breath is life. So by proxy, if we lengthen the breath, we lengthen and enhance the amount of life force that is in the body. So begin to play with that here. So deepen the breath. Let the breath be the deepest that it's been all day. Pause at the top for 1 or 2 beats. And then exhale out the nose. 4 more like that. Whatever pace that you're called to, I just ask that it be deeper than the breath beforehand. And begin to notice the effect that that intentional breath has on the body. Solely focusing on the breath here and settling into the seat taking our levels down to be more receptive to the wisdom that arises in the meditative experience. At the bottom of the next exhale, suspend the technique and allow breath to return to normal, noticing that normal may have shifted because we've deepened the breath. So celebrate this new normal and settle into that new normal before we begin to ponder anything. One of the things that the meditative experience has given me in the practice of meditation is that you guys have probably noticed I have a lot of energy, and I've had to learn how to lengthen the fuse so as not to burn myself out. So imagine your inhale here being the lengthening of the fuse, whether it be, the phrase burning the candle at both ends, just make the wick longer through deepening the breath here. So shifting from the new normal back to a deeper breath. So maybe take it a pace or two longer than you have been, just to settle into the experience of creating a deeper breath. Keep shoulders back and down. Face soft. Rooted in the seat, but light in the head. Almost as if you would be a bobblehead should you care to be. And from this expanded breath that we've been taking, consider what the phrase reimagination means to you. And consider that phrase in the context of the deeper breath that we've taken, because by simply expanding our breath, we have reimagined our breath capacity. So what if reimagination was that simple? Is that simple? So factoring in this simplicity, what can you reimagine in your mind and life that you may have seen as impossible or unpassable, but with a deeper breath and fresh eyes, is actually not as difficult as you thought? So keep breath deep and allow the mind to daydream about what that might be in this moment. And once you have settled on that thing or two that you care to focus on, if comfortable, place one hand over the heart and the other hand over that hand, pressing thumbs together as in the shape of a butterfly. Metaphysically and through shamanic tradition, the butterfly is the symbol of transformation. So with this butterfly symbol over your heart and deep breath, continue to reimagine the item that you've placed in your mind's eye, and how might you approach this situation differently with a deeper breath and a more curious orientation, as opposed to one that's so judgmental. Remembering that it's not our job to judge in this life. Our job is to love. It's the God's and Goddess's job to judge, not ours. Allow that deep breath that you've been cultivating for the entirety of our meditative experience to nourish your daydream. What feelings does that engender? Are you lighter? Are you happier? Are you terrified? If you're happier or lighter, take a deeper breath to relish in that. If fear has come up, take a deeper breath to tell the body it's okay. it's not common in the human condition to welcome change. But from our spiritual orientation, we know that change is the only constant. So maybe in this moment, the reimagination that takes place is reimagining your relationship to change. Just a few more breaths here in this daydream, in this reimagination, in this invitation to embody something different simply through shifting the mind and deepening the breath. Four more breaths of the daydream. Many meditations offer structure, but in times as wild and chaotic as ours, I want to foster creativity, which is the genesis of why I chose this meditative experience. So get in touch with your inner creative being, which is infinite. We just have to give it space. Bottom of your next exhale, if you have hands over the heart, place them backs of hands on the knees or in the lap, whatever is more comfortable for you, shoulders back and down. And now just reflect on the experience. So let's spend a couple of moments here, sifting and filtering through what we just experienced. Rooted in the creativity of our daydream, rooted in the love and concern and care of this community, and connected physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Keep face soft, eyes soft or closed, however is most comfortable. Breath deep for 5 or 6 more. Same cadence that you've been having, deeper than before, but not as deep as prior to. Last 2 breaths here. Bottom of the next exhale, bring hands to heart center, pressing palms together, Anjali Mudra. Press tip of tongue to the roof of the mouth, gently pressing, forming an energetic lock, also forming a seal to seal the meditative practice with precision and reverence, especially when done in community, because there's power in meditation and Sangha. When open hearts and minds are joined in unison, things shift and change in ways that we can't fathom. So let's celebrate and honor that here with 2 clearing breaths, with tongue still on the roof of the mouth if comfortable. Inhale through the nose. Exhale out the nose. Inhale through the nose. Exhale out the nose. Release tip of tongue from roof of the mouth. Bow head towards hands. In a sign of reverence and as an offering to the blessings of the practice. When ready, open your eyes and find your focus. Welcome back. So I may have a lot of energy, but after meditation, I hope you're a little more mellow.
Perfect. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Reggie, just taking time. You've been sharing so much in this community, but thank you for joining us on a Sunday evening. And in our tradition, we'll send you off with a joyful exclamation of a jai. So if you want to unmute yourselves, we extend to you, reflect back the joy that you brought for us. So, jai!
Jai! Jai!
Thank you.
So much gratitude.
Thank you so much.
Indeed, love and grace to all, and however it can be of service, please let me know.
Yeah, we hope to see you more in our community. And he has, we've linked his website on the description for the class, so check it out. I only took one class, but I'm planning to attend some more, and that's something new you just started, your active piece. And
yeah.
So
activepeaceyoga.com is my teaching practice. Public schedules there. Every once in a while, the Prince class shows up, but the Prince class is like it's more muse, right? So when it hits, and then more artsy than anything. But all of you are welcome if and when you care to show up. And Miriam, I just thank you for the opportunity to present in front of your community. I hope it's been beneficial to your healing and to your enlightenment.
Absolutely. Thank you. Peace. Thank you, everyone, for showing up and being.
Love and grace to all. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a beautiful evening.